Good afternoon or morning, everyone. Welcome to our fourth Professional Development Week session, Managing Up and Standing Out. My name is Alexis Flowers, and I'm the Vice President of Programs here at NEW. As you know, this week is our annual Professional Development Week, where we focus on programming and content to help the women in our network advance in the workplace. Today, we are joined by a rockstar panel of women, and I will introduce them now, including Hadley Heath Manning, Vice President of Policy at the Independent Women's Forum, Kristin Dobson, National Field Director with the Leadership Institute, and Becky Liner, Executive Vice President of the James Madison Institute in Florida. To briefly go over format, I will share quick bios of everyone, and then we will jump right into our discussion, where our panelists will share lessons learned and wisdom from years in leadership. Please feel free to engage in the chat with others, and we will be doing a Q&A towards the end. So if you'd like to put your question in the chat box, you can do that, or you can use the Q&A box function as well. All right, so kicking off, Hadley Heath Manning is Vice President for Policy at the Independent Women's Forum and Independent Women's Voice, and is a prominent figure in policy circles. She has also testified before Congress and state legislatures, and is a frequent guest on Fox Business Network, and her work is often featured in publications like the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Recognized for her contributions, Hadley was named to Forbes 30 Under 30 list in law and policy, and received honors from the Republican National Committee and Red Alert Politics. Kristin serves as the National Field Director for Campus Leadership Programs, having previously held positions including Deputy National Field Director and Regional Field Coordinator. With a background as a Leadership Institute field representative in Michigan, Kristin is experienced in grassroots organizing. A 2011 graduate from DePaul University, she has enriched her education through programs at Georgetown University and internships with notable organizations like ALEC, the Heartland Institute, and the Koch Institute program. Last but certainly not least, Becky Liner is the Executive Vice President of the James Madison Institute and Director of the Preston A. Wells Jr. Center for American Ideals. In that role, she oversees civics education initiatives and internship programs throughout Florida's colleges and universities. With over 2 decades of public service experience, including roles in the United States Senate and the Florida's Executive Office of the Governor, Becky brings extensive expertise to her current position. She's a native of Tallahassee, holding a Bachelor's of Science degree in Public Administration from Auburn University, and is recognized for her leadership in numerous community organizations, including the Junior League of Tallahassee and the Auburn Alumni Association. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Okay, so kicking things off, we'll start with one of the fundamental questions that we get asked a lot. What is it that makes a good manager? I'll let each of you answer, but let's go ahead and start with Hadley.
Hi, guys. Well, I'm going to be very personal today, so I'll just speak on behalf of myself. No organizations, although I love IWF. But I have to share what's on my heart as a Christian. I take my cues on leadership and management from my faith and my faith in Jesus. And his model for leadership is servant leadership. And so I think what makes a good manager, what makes a good leader is someone who can serve others and who has a desire to serve others. You know, I used to be a little more public facing at IWF, although I still get to do a lot of that fun stuff. But I think when I joined our leadership team and became the manager of our policy department, I was kind of moving from a shortstop position on the field to the coaching staff in a way, you know. And so I think as a manager, you have to understand that your job is to make your people successful. It's not just to make you successful, but it's to make your people successful. So to be in their corner, to be a good listener, to help align their interests with the mission and the interest of the organization, those are all good traits. But ultimately, it comes down to service and laying yourself down for other people. I don't think I do that very well, by the way, but that's what I strive to do in my family and in my work.
I love that. Thank you. Becky, let's go to you next.
Well, I'd like to echo much of what you just said. I too believe in the model of servant leadership. And I think one of the best ways to be a manager is to not ask your people to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself. So, you know, first one there, last to leave. If garbage needs to be taken out, you take the garbage out. So you're not, you know, putting yourself above your team. But in addition to that, again, echoing, being a good listener is really important. Being accessible to your team is important. You don't want to close yourself off. And then I think we don't value enough being kind and just putting yourself in the other person's place. And you never know what else, what's going on in someone else's life. And so our CEO here at JMI is fond of saying, assume the best. So rather than jumping to conclusions, assume everybody's doing their best until you know different.
We love that. Here at New, we have some internal guideposts, and assuming goodwill of our colleagues is one of them. So that's definitely an important one. Kristin, we can go to you next.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. A couple of years ago, I was at, I believe it was at the State Policy Network conference. They were there was the either current or former CEO of Chick-fil-A, and she said that if you're not serving chicken, you need to be serving the people that are serving chicken. And I basically wrote that in emails to all of my staff who manage people, for like 2 months. I'm pretty sure I annoyed everybody. But I really believe that. And to add another layer to it, as I guess my experience grew and as I was managing more and more people, I realized that I'm no longer managing 5 people. I was managing 46 people. So there's just too much work. So learning to delegate within that, and showing the people that I'm delegating to that I'm also willing to do that work. But sometimes what I'm doing is more strategy, has really been effective. And I think that's the best way to lead.
I love that. And the serving chicken and serving people who are serving chicken. That's great. That's very insightful. So sort of flipping it a little bit, can you share a story of a time where you felt like you were maybe not being the best manager, and how did you improve that situation? Kristin, since you can jump right in.
Yeah, so I've probably had hundreds of employees over the last 10 years. But there are four or five notable ones that I just had the hardest time managing. When I run a meeting, I'm very organized. I have a list. They had a tendency to interrupt. They had a tendency to, I guess, ask questions that I was just about to answer. And as like a very methodical person, I really struggled with that. It took probably like 6 years before I was like, I need to figure out how to deal with this, because I keep getting those personalities and they're amazing at their job. Like, they're the best recruiters. Interrupting was an issue. And it's not just one person, it was several. So I actually went to a management training, and it was more focused on personalities and how people like to be communicated with. And I did it with one of these specific employees, and I was able, with obviously without being like, I have a hard time managing you. But we went together and it was really, really fruitful. I understood how they wanted to be communicated with and how it was the opposite of how I wanted to be communicated with. Which I think overall made me a better manager, because then there were other people that I was like, oh, well, if this is their, like, how they like to be talked to, then, and maybe I'm not doing that right either. And I was able to, we did a whole profile for the entire team. And so we could better communicate with people, and me specifically, because I know, at least when I was in my early 20s, my response was just snap at people, which, like, obviously is not professional or okay. But I think that actually getting the training really, really helped.
Yes, that's great. And self-aware of you to be like, hey, there's maybe a problem here with communication. Let's try to figure out these different styles to see like where there's a disconnect. So that's awesome. Hadley, what about you?
I'll echo something that Kristin mentioned earlier about delegation. Okay, so one of the things I've had to learn as a manager is that delegation isn't just telling somebody to do something and then also kind of doing it yourself for them. It's letting go, and really entrusting your direct reports to get the job done. And there also came a point for me as a manager where I discovered, and it's funny, if anybody at IWF, if word gets back to them that I said this, they might say this is still a problem and it's something that I'm still trying to improve. As a manager, I can turn into a bottleneck for people. And that's when I have to be humble and recognize I maybe not able to keep up with all of my direct reports. And so what happened some time ago at IWF is I recruited really kind of a deputy for me. And I said, I'm going to give you some of these people and you're going to manage them because I'm managing too many people right now. And so having the humility to say, I can't do this, you know, I've bitten off more than I can chew. That's part of being a manager, is recognizing your own limits. And so I love what Kristin said about getting some training, because that sort of falls in the same theme. But at a certain point, you have to recognize when you're overloaded or when you're trying to do too much, it's time to recruit some help.
Yes, that's great advice too. Miss Becky, what about you?
Oh gosh, so many through the years. As you mentioned, one of the things that I do is I manage our interns and I manage our campus reps. So we have campus reps on public and private campuses around the state of Florida. And as you might imagine, with interns and campus reps, I have students from all over the country, from all kinds of backgrounds. Some have had jobs before, some have not had jobs before. Some have had parents who kind of help them understand the workplace. Some come in not ever having been in a workplace. And I found myself early on being kind of a nag, where I was more of a mother figure. Have you done, did you put your coat on? No. Did you, have you turned your report in? Have you, where are you with your deliverables? And constantly reminding them. And I had to learn not to be a mother and not to be a nag in the workplace, and treat them as professionals. But, again, going back to what's been said before, training is critical. And once I have made sure that these employees are trained, I need to treat them as professionals, even if they're still in college. Make sure that they understand the job responsibilities and what the deliverables are, and not babysit them. And, sometimes there are consequences when they don't meet those deliverables. But I have learned most of the time not to be a nag.
It's hard, the delegation, all of that. But I like that all of you reference training. I think some people maybe assume that, oh, just because you have, like, I think people have inclinations, like strong leadership skills, but that doesn't mean that you'll start on day one and be this perfect manager. We're always growing. There's different personalities, different situations, and I think continuing education is very important. And just as a personal note, I actually was one of Miss Becky's interns many years ago. It's been a while now. And you were wonderful as a manager, so thank you.
I didn't have to nag you, Alexis.
No, you did not. So kind of going along that, and back to something that Miss Becky, that you had mentioned about kindness. So I think we hear a lot that women have, and sometimes it's portrayed as such in media, where for women to rise to the top, they have to be very cold, maybe take on more masculine qualities. That to be in a C-suite position or any kind of like high level position, you can't really be nice or be kind. You have to be sort of cutthroat and intense. Miss Becky, you are one of the kindest people I know, I can say. How do you balance that? How do you balance, you are so kind and yet people respect you? So how do you balance getting the respect as a manager, but then also not taking on these qualities that maybe just aren't you?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for us as women to recognize, and Hadley, a nod to you. I too, and I know Alexis, you are too. I'm a Christian also, and I try to bring those values into the workplace. But women are different. We're not smaller men. We're created to be different, and we have different skill sets and different gifts. But I think it's important to always remember there's a difference between being a professional and being mean or being tough. And I think you can be firm and kind, but a lot of that goes hand in hand with being with being fair, with being a good listener, and knowing when to speak up and when to hold your peace, if you will. And I have a friend that is fond of saying you have to know which mountains you want to die on. And so you have to know yourself, but it's okay to be feminine in the workplace, but you do have to know how to be professional to earn that respect. People won't give you respect. You have to earn it. And a lot of that too comes with knowing your stuff, knowing your job. And so that they know that they can trust what you're telling them. That I know I'm kind of rambling all over the place. I just think there's so many things that go into being a successful woman in the workplace, but I do not think you have to abandon your femininity to do so.
Yes, no, that was great. Hadley, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say I'm very lucky because my whole career I've had the opportunity to work with pretty much nothing but women because our staff is all female at IWF. Of course, we work with men in our coalition partners and allies and so forth. But I will say this because I imagine it's a common thing for many women. I'm a very conflict averse person. And you might not think that, like this panel that I just spoke on a university campus, which is pretty left leaning. There were lefties on the panel and we were going at it, but I hate conflict. I really do. And especially when it comes to interpersonal conflict. However, what I've learned as a manager and in life is that if there's something that needs to be communicated to somebody, you'll do much better off to just say it, be assertive, be kind, be firm, of course. But if you keep it to yourself and you let it fester, that's going to create a worse conflict for everybody involved. So sometimes as a manager, I think a big part of it, as I mentioned earlier, is listening. We have to listen to people. Mm-hmm. And I think that IWF, being an all-female staff, we probably have the same amount of, interpersonal conflict on our staff that any organization might have, male or female, right? Sometimes I think men are worse. But when you do have a conflict within your staff, then a big part of your job as a manager is to listen genuinely to both sides. And if you're going to be involved in the conflict resolution, you have to be assertive. And I think it's better to just get to it as soon as possible and don't let it wait the weekend. Don't let it wait too long. Just be honest and open and try to get everybody's feelings out in the open. That's something I've really struggled with as a manager because I'm so conflict averse. And I think probably a lot of women are.
Yes, agreed. And our all-female team at New, I can relate. Kristin, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think that I completely agree. Being very clear is very important. Early in my managerial career, one thing I noticed is that if I didn't respond to an email within the hour, I would start off with, "I'm so sorry that I was delayed," and be very, I guess, I wouldn't be as I wouldn't answer the question right away. I would apologize. I would ask how people are doing, which is always important. But I found that when I was just more clear, didn't apologize as often, that it didn't really make me feel as much as me. But I think that it got me more respect, if that makes sense. Because I didn't do anything wrong. I can wait 48 hours to send an email. That's okay. There's other things going on. But it took me a while to learn that. And once I learned that, I feel like I was a much better manager and taken a lot more seriously.
That's a great point, and something that a lot of women struggle with, myself included. Sometimes I will write out the whole email and go back through and delete sorries or fluff that I've added. I also had a former manager who she had a very self-deprecating sense of humor, and the way she would talk about herself, especially even in the workplace, would make comments like, "Oh, I'm so," a lot of apologizing and "Oh gosh, sorry, I'm an idiot that I messed that up." She would say things like that. And it took a colleague, it was actually a male colleague, who pointed out to her at one point, it was you need to listen to how you're speaking about yourself, because the way that you're speaking about yourself and the things that you're saying, people are going to internalize that, and they're listening. And you're listening and you're believing that. So like, you're not an idiot. You work here, you're brilliant. You've got this job and this management role for a reason. So be more confident. And sometimes we just need a little reminder that the way we talk about ourselves, the way we communicate about those things matters too. I did want to pivot to conflict resolution because that is a part of management. So Hadley, I know you were talking about conflict and none of us, well, few of us actually just like it. What are some strategies for conflict resolution when you want to maintain good working relationships with everyone?
I'll let Kristin and Becky chime in because I feel like I've already shared mine. Be a good listener and get to it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that listening and not having I have an opinion, but not sharing my opinion before all the facts are out there is the most important thing. The amount of times that I've listened to both sides of the story and then asked clarifying questions and then found out that that's actually not quite what happened. And if I had just jumped in and said like, okay, you're right, you're wrong, that would have been detrimental to just the team in general. So holding back, which is really hard when you're really into politics because I got a lot of opinions. But holding back has been my biggest asset in conflict resolution and it going well on both sides.
If I may add one thing about listening, and I hope that people don't take this the wrong way, and I'm curious what Kristin and Becky think, but sometimes I think when something has happened in the workplace, somebody had a bad experience or somebody messed up, one of my direct reports will sometimes want to grab my ear about it. And then I think my job not only is my job to listen, but that may be the fullness of my job in that moment is just to listen. You know, sometimes there are actions to take, but sometimes as a manager, you just have to make sure that people are heard and make sure that, you know, they have a place to go when they have things like that that they need to share with somebody. Now, sometimes you listen and you have to take action, but sometimes your job is just to listen. And I don't know if that's a controversial thing to say, but that's been my experience as a manager anyway.
I completely agree with that. I will tell people, I'm like, are you reporting this or are you venting? Can you just tell me so I know what my role is here? Because it just makes it a lot easier to be clear. Because if they're like, I don't want to report anything, I just need you to know there are certain things obviously I would have to report, but it makes it more clear.
And I'll add a little, something a little different. So I totally agree with what's been said. However, if it becomes there is a significant conflict between parties, I think it's really important to get the parties in the same room and so everybody's hearing the same information at the same time. And then I think it's important as a manager to ask those parties, how would you suggest we resolve this conflict? How would you like to see this conflict resolved? And let the parties hear each other. And to the extent that you can, and it's not always possible, but to the extent that you can, have them come up with a compromise that 100%, either party is going to like the whole thing, the whole package, but that together they come up with a compromise that gives each party a little bit of what they wanted. That's not always possible, but when you can do that, it's healthy for the organization.
Absolutely. And I think they're much more going to be much more inclined to like implement and move forward in a positive way if it's not just some top-down directive of, okay, this is what you kids are going to do.
Right.
Absolutely. Switching gears a little bit, so thinking sort of in the reverse, in the business world, I was an econ major, college business. We often hear sort of that business speak of managing up. And we talk about it in our organization internally. We named the session in part around that. What does that mean to you? What does that look like in an office situation? And what can younger staffers do to make sure that they're doing that well for their managers? Ms. Becky, you want to start?
Sure. And I will start by saying that I have worked with our CEO now for 19 years. So I am well familiar with managing up. I think it all starts with getting to know your manager as a person and getting to know what makes them tick, and getting to know, I mean, I hate using this example, but when you're married, and you know your spouse and you know their likes and their dislikes, you also know when to ask them something and when not to ask them something. And you're tuned in to moods and other things that are going on. And I think that translates wonderfully to the workplace with your manager. Know them as a person, know their likes, know their dislikes, know their work style, know what their triggers are. And then know when is a good time to ask and when is not a good time to ask, because they have pressures like everybody else, and they have moods like everybody else. And it all boils down to observing and listening. And I feel like listening is underscoring every single thing we're talking about today. But you really do need to treat it as a relationship and get to know that person.
I think another big part of being a manager is problem solving. You know, you're thinking about certain problems for your organization, for your department. You're trying to come up with solutions. You're trying to cast vision. You're trying to make a plan. This is big picture, higher order, critical thinking. And that's really fun. That's what I love about being a manager and being a leader. But one thing that I try to do for my boss, and one thing that I hope that my direct reports do for me, is they don't come to me asking me to do their critical thinking for them, right? And so in a book called Traction, which is about management, the author talks about a problem being a monkey on somebody's back, okay? So you've got a problem, you're trying to figure out how to solve it. Maybe you're planning an event, or you're trying to write a paper, or you're trying to, whatever it is that your organization, your business is doing, you've got a problem to solve, that's the monkey on your back. Don't take that monkey into your boss's office and try to put that monkey on your boss's back. Okay, because not only is that creating more work and using more of the mental load of your boss to figure it out, but if you come in and you say, instead of saying, what should I do about this? You come in and say, here's the problem. Here's what I think we should do about this. This is what I propose. Are you okay with that? Because you might need to get sign off from your manager, your boss. That's a good idea. But if you come with a proposal, then I think it's more likely that things go your way, you know, and that you have some say in how the problem is going to be worked out. And so that's a win-win, because it helps your boss. You know, you're being helpful, coming up with a solution. Maybe they say, I don't really like your plan, let's do something different. But at least you didn't come in saying, I've got a problem and I'm too lazy to think through how I think it should be solved, you know. And so that's a concept called, you know, the monkey on the back. Don't put a monkey on your boss's back. Figure out your proposal first, and then go in with a yes or no question. Do you approve of this or not? Rather than an open-ended question of, I don't know what to do. What do you think we should do?
Great visual. Thank you. Go ahead, Kristin.
I completely agree with all of that, but I also think that to, I guess, add a practical layer to it of if you understand what your boss is asking for and you give it to them in the format that is the most digestible for them, that is the best managing up that you can do. Like a good example would be, my supervisor, he checks his email often. But a lot of times I know what meetings he's going into, I know he asked me a question, he emailed it to me, he's probably not checking his email in the VP meeting. So I text it to him because I know that he'll see that on his phone. Or if I ask somebody for a list of something that's going in an email to a partner organization, if they give it to me in Excel, that's super helpful, but giving it to me, I have to reformat it, I have to put it in an email. So understanding what the task is for, so you can give it and what they're going to do with that information, so you can give it to them in the most effective manner for them, is really appreciated.
100%. Yes. And I think that comes down to the listening and observing that Miss Becky that you talked about. But then also sometimes, of course, when it's appropriate, like know your timing, but don't be afraid to ask too. Like, how would this be most helpful for me to give it to you? Because some of that you have to learn. I had a boss early on. I'm a context person. I want the backstory. I want like a little bit more information. She was a bullets person. And so I had to train myself to send her emails with the bullets and exactly what I needed from her. She was very like high level, you know, Karen, when I report to her, it's funny you mentioned texting. She does not text for work, like does not want it on her, just that she keeps everything separate. But we learned that early on. She explained it. And so now we know how to better communicate. So I would say, yeah, just don't be afraid to ask too. We'll jump in and do some audience questions in a minute, but I kind of wanted to throw one more out to the group and then we'll see if anybody has some questions they'd like to ask. So many of the women logged on today, I can tell, are still in college, maybe going to be starting their career journey soon. What are some skill sets that they can be working on now, even if they're just young in their career or early in their career, not in manager roles yet, but what can they be doing where they're at to better prepare and train themselves to be managers one day? So Kristin, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I think that really focusing on, I guess, being a yes person is really valuable. I see it a lot with interns coming through within the last, like, I guess since COVID, where we'll ask them to do like pack folders or go to the post office, but they find something I get more high level to do as opposed to like the lower level things. And those people tend to not rise to the top. So I would highly suggest doing those little tasks. When I was an intern, if I didn't have anything to do, I literally walked around with a box and was like, do you have anything to shred? And I would just shred for hours. And that was, I mean, it's valuable to somebody. And it kept me busy. And I just think that doing those little things and being willing to help is extremely important, because if your supervisor doesn't have to worry about taking packages to the post office, then they can be working on something else and they'll be so thankful to you.
I would echo that. I mean, you think I didn't go get coffee for people when I started at IWF? You think I didn't, go run photocopies of stuff? Like everybody does that when you're in a first job or in an internship. And so I think it's important for people to remember, when you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you're not just showing that you can run a photocopier. You're not just showing that you can go get somebody a cup of coffee. You're showing that you have the humility and the servant attitude that will take you very far. People will entrust you with more. If you're entrusted with a little, you'll get entrusted with more. And so I would say saying yes to as many opportunities as possible. I said yes to things when I was just starting my career that I would not say yes to now, because I have little kids at home and I have the ability and discretion to say yes to some things and say no to other things. But when I was starting out, I mean, I would do TV on Memorial Day at 5:30 in the morning. Everybody else has a day off, but I'm getting in there. I'm doing it because I'm hustling, so that's just a natural part of starting out. But those are the attributes that people will see if you're a go-getter and a yes person. Other things that I tell people when they're just starting out is, look at other women who are out there that you admire and you think, I think their career path looks cool. I want to learn more about it. And ask them, for crying out loud. Look, we're showing up today. We love talking about this stuff. People love giving advice. Are you kidding me? So buddy up with some people like that. Read about the authors, read biographies, read how they got to where they are. Where did they go to college? Maybe they didn't go to an Ivy League school. Maybe they went somewhere you never heard of, but look where they are now and see the interesting steps that they've taken along the way. If you're interested in being a manager, make sure that you really want to be a manager. Talk to some people in management, ask them if you can shadow them for the day, learn more about the opportunities that you're chasing before you dive in headlong, because at the beginning of your career, that's when you really have the opportunity to try a little of this, try a little of that. And so take advantage of that if you can. Also think through, whether you don't work for a really big employer or a smaller employer. I really benefited from working for a smaller employer. I got to go kind of fast track through some promotions. And I got a lot of opportunities because those things fell to me, because, if 3 or 4 people said no to it, guess who's there to say yes? It's me, So I would say at the beginning of your career, you've got an awesome opportunity to demonstrate that you're capable and that you're willing and that you're a go-getter and that you're a self-starter, and that you're open to learning, and I hope that even now mid-career that I'm still all of those things. I hope that I'm still open to learning, right? But if you can work for women or men that you respect and that you admire, and if you can get to know people that you respect and admire and hear their advice, use them as a sounding board, find some mentors early on who care about you and care about your path. If you're willing to invest in yourself, and improving yourself, then people will see that, and people will see that person is willing to invest in improving herself. So I'm also going to invest in helping her improve.
And I'll just
Also-
add, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to add that that makes total sense. I definitely think that if you work hard in the beginning, you can set yourself up for, I guess, I'm gonna go with have a family in the future. I worked really hard the first 8 years at the Leadership Institute. I came in early, left late. I was always like the yes person there to help. And now I have to leave twice a week at 4 so I can go get my son. And that's really, I don't think I would have been able to have that set up to be able to have that balance of family and career if I hadn't shown that I was capable and willing to work really hard in the beginning. That now people give me grace that I'm not sure I would have if I hadn't done that, if that makes sense.
And Alexis, I was just going to speak to not those that are early in their career, but to those women on the call that are still in college. And the thing that I would recommend is get involved. Volunteer for organizations on your campus, volunteer for organizations in your community. There are so many skills you can learn from being a volunteer, and again, it kind of goes back to don't say no. Try everything. If you don't think you're capable or you're interested in doing events, virtually any job you have down the line will have some aspect of event management to it, or staffing an event. And so don't be afraid to volunteer for an organization that says, hey, we need help doing an event, and you'll learn skills about events, or you'll learn skills about fundraising, which if you are working anywhere in the nonprofit world, everybody needs to, as we say around here, everybody's in fundraising, everybody's in development. But honestly, I probably would not have the job I have today based just on my my degree and based on the jobs I've had. A lot of my resume has been supplemented by involvement in community service and skills that I gained from community service. So you don't always have to have a paid position to learn a new skill. So I would say involvement is really a key to developing skills.
Absolutely. And I'll give a little shout out for the Junior League of Tallahassee. As I know, Becky, you've been very involved with them. And I was in it when I lived in Tallahassee. They're in junior leagues, they're in cities all over the country. And it's a great way to learn. It's like professionalizing volunteerism,
Right.
to learn so many skills. I learned a lot. They hone that practice very well. They're wonderful volunteers, and they show you how to be a good staffer, a good supports person, a good team member. I learned a lot, even just from things that seemed, oh, you're just volunteering at this initiative or this event, but I learned a lot of great skills that I've absolutely transferred into my career. Okay, I did see a question come in. It said, how would you handle a situation where you're being firm, but others may see it as, or consider it to be possibly hostile, or like if taken in a way you were not intending. So you think you're being firm, but others might think that you are being hostile or inconsiderate. So how do you balance that? Does anyone want to jump in?
I think, again, and I know we're beating the drum of listening and communication, but I think it goes to communication. And in a situation like that, I think you have to listen to the person or persons that think you're being hostile and find out what it is that you said that's being interpreted as being hostile, and taking an opportunity to listen so that you hear it from their perspective. And often we do miscommunicate, or often we say things that are misconstrued, and that's not what we meant, and we need the opportunity to clarify. But I think I think it's important to take responsibility when you have not communicated well. And there is a lot of power in saying, I was wrong. let me try again, and really listening to how other people are taking what it is that you've said.
I have two thoughts. One is this thing right here. Y'all don't want to hear this, but pick it up. You know, we live in a time where email and text are very popular ways to communicate. I do it all the time, right? I probably send millions in exaggeration. I send a lot of emails, right? But if you get an email and you think, oh, this tone, that strikes me, they're mad, something's off. Pick up the phone, or even better, Google Meet, or even better, if you have the privilege of living close to and working and under the same roof with your employees, FaceTime, so it's easier, I think, for people to get all of the communication cues when they can see your face, when you can sit down together. And then the other thought that I have, and I do this a lot, is a third party, okay? Ask a third party. I'm drafting this email to somebody. It's got some critical feedback, or it's got something in it that I need to communicate. It's not easy for me to communicate. Would you take a look at it and tell me what you think about my tone and my choice of words here, and get some feedback from somebody else, if that's a possibility? Now, sometimes things are confidential and you can't do that, but it's a good learning opportunity to get some feedback from a third party if you can. And if nothing else, that should give you reassurance that you are being firm but not hostile, that you are using the right choice of words. So getting outside of yourself, because how do you know? I've heard it said that communication isn't what's said, but it's what's received, right? So if someone is receiving a tone of hostility, then I love Becky's suggestion to ask them to be specific. What was it about this that you felt was hostile? But also asking for advice from somebody who can review the work.
I believe that Becky said earlier about, is this the mountain that you want to die on? I think that that's really important, because a lot of times it's it's better to just say, I'm sorry, and not qualify, like, I'm sorry that you felt that way, or I'm sorry you took it that way. Like, I'm so sorry, that's not how I meant it. One thing, if we're dealing with email rather than I guess speaking to somebody, I have a tendency, I will write an email and then I will come back to it and read it, and then basically take out all the negative things that I said and reword them to be more positive and actionable. And that's really helpful. But I mean, you can't control how other people react to you. All you can do is control how you react after they say that they're offended or upset.
The written word piece, I actually was just working on a blog post, and one of my tips was pick up the phone. And I actually, it's funny, Hadley, I put like, this is gonna maybe trigger some people from different generations, but so much can be resolved by that. Understanding, and some of it's self-awareness too, like understanding. There's been emails that have come into me where I've been like, yikes, that's like a little, but because I know maybe it was my manager or someone I work with, I know their personality. I'm like, you know what? They're just probably busy. They've got all on their plate. It was short, but it wasn't rude. So some of us need to be self-reflective about that, and like what's actually offensive versus what are we misinterpreting or trying to read between the lines in an email that's maybe not there. And face-to-face time, phone or Google Meet or things like that kind of can help break that down for sure. And then, yes, deciding what hills to die on, definitely, Kristin. Pivoting a little bit, but we get this question a lot. We're a women's organization. We work with a lot of young women, many of whom want careers, at least for different periods and seasons of their life, but they also very much want families. So any tips from y'all, as all moms and very successful women on this panel, how to balance both career and family? We've heard from different speakers, you can have it all, just not at the same time. What does that look like, and how is that evolved or shifted in your own personal career? So Miss Becky, you want to start?
Sure. I think, well, first of all, I think you have to know yourself and what your priorities are. And then order your life on your personal priorities. But having said that, we all want to be excellent employees. We want to be the perfect moms, the wonderful wives, good friend, sister, mom, you name it. To the extent that you can, leave work at work and be fully engaged wherever you are. If you're at work, be fully engaged. If you're at home, be fully engaged. Now, those cross over sometimes, life happens. But I think we have gotten so used to being to multitasking that a lot of times we don't concentrate on the one thing that might be right there in front of us. And I think, you know, yes, we all have these, but sometimes these need to go away in order to focus on the people that matter. And that, I mean, that's bottom line for me, is people are and relationships. That's what's important. So try to leave work at work and fully engage wherever you are.
So I have a 15-month-old and one due in 6 weeks. And one thing that I'm just astounded by, because especially with COVID, I learned to work from home a lot. I always worked at home, but I didn't. COVID just kind of like my home was also second work. And I'm astounded that I go home at 4 2 days a week and I don't think about work. Like, I didn't know that that was possible. Like all through my last pregnancy, I truly, the balance was much easier than I thought. Which I no one had ever told me that. So I hope that helps somebody out there, because it was just, it's amazing. Like, I'm fully engaged with my kid when I'm with him. Which I was always fully engaged with work. So and it doesn't make me a bad employee. Like, I can hop back on after bedtime if they need me. But it really, it's not as, I don't want to say it's not as hard as you think, but it's very difficult, but it's different than you would expect.
Well, how much time do we have? You know, this is a topic that I could talk about for hours. I love this topic. I think it brings up so many other questions about our theology of work. Why do we work? What is work? I won't go so deep and philosophical on you guys, but I will give you some of the best advice that I've tried to pass along to other people coming behind me. I have a 7-year-old, I have a 5-year-old, I have a 3-year-old, I have a 5-month-old. So every couple of years I've had a new baby, and I've been so thankful to have an employer that offers me extreme flexibility. I work from home. I work a couple time zones away from most of my colleagues. I am with my kids after school. You know, I'm with my kids a lot during the school day, during the work day. I'm frequently taking breaks right now to nurse my baby at home. So I feel like I've really benefited from having an employer who shares values that I have, in terms of not just having a family-friendly workplace policy, but having a family-friendly workplace culture. Because I hear other people's kids in the background of our conference calls too. Okay. And that's one reason IWF has like more babies per worker than most organizations, because we're very pro-family workplace culture. So I would say, if you're interested in being a mom and staying in the workforce, look for an employer like that, even before you are a mom, and look for a track like that. You know, it used to be called mommy tracking your career in like a derogatory sense. I would say it's a good thing. You know, if you can choose a career path that will allow you that flexibility, if that's something that you think you might want to take advantage of, then you should look for that early in your career. And I'm so glad that things have worked out for me well that way. But I will say, you are replaceable at work. You are not replaceable in your home for your husband and your children. And in many cases, people are called upon to care for their aging parents or other family members. And so those relationships, I agree with Becky, those take precedence. I also like the C.S. Lewis quote that children are not a distraction from work. They are the most important work. And so I always tell people my number one job is I'm a mom. And then after that, I work for IWF. You know, so always keeping your priorities straight. I think reassessing frequently. Kids, they change so fast. You know, they're born, they're babies. You got, you know, if you're breastfeeding, that's something. You take a maternity leave, you come back, maybe you work part-time for a season. You know, you don't have to pick one solution for the whole of your career. You can maybe every 6 months or so, check in and say, how is this arrangement working out for me and my family? You don't want to be overloaded. You don't want to feel like all you ever do is take care of your family and do your job. You want to also have room to be a church member, a community member, to be a good friend to your friends, to go to the gym and work out every once in a while. You know, your mental and physical health matters too. And I think that this hamster wheel of being of working motherhood has been really punishing for a lot of people in my generation. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be the glass half full. You know, I can be present as a mom, and I can also contribute as an employee. What a gift. What a great opportunity. You know, I don't want to see it as the glass half empty, that I've got all these pressures on me to be the best at everything. Of course, I'm not going to be the best at everything. And I'm going to end up saying no to a lot of opportunities at work, even if I'm able to stay in the workforce. I'm not going to travel right now. I'm not going to do evening events. You know, like I'm able to put limits around what I will and will not do at work because I'm prioritizing my family, even to the point where, you know, I would say hold your career ambitions loosely. You know, don't make an idol of your work. That there may come a time where you have to step out of the workforce entirely, or you may feel that that's what's best for you and your family. And the way that we are training young people, the way that I was trained in school throughout my education years, it's like I was being formed and educated for nothing but the height of productivity in the workplace. You know, and motherhood doesn't work like that. I don't think there's any such thing as a productive mother, because motherhood's not about productivity. It's about relationship. It's about being present with your kids. They don't care if you get the to-do list done. In fact, they're probably going to make sure you don't get the to-do list done. You know, so it's a totally different way of thinking when I'm at work and when I'm with my children. And so I do think having firm boundaries is good. Another, I'm going to stop talking in 1 minute. I'm going to make one book recommendation and then I'll stop. But if you want to follow up on this conversation, it's something that I seriously be happy to talk with anybody about. There's a book called I Know How She Does It. It's by Laura Vanderkam, and it's a time management book. And my only criticism of the book is that it's only about time management. You know, it's not also about managing your mental load or your energy, which are also finite resources. But if you're interested in a good book about time management in working motherhood, flag that for later. I imagine a lot of the college women on the call today don't have kids yet, but if you aspire to it, then, you know, be in control of your own destiny. Decide on what kind of work arrangement you want to have and seek that out. Don't just slide into whatever you feel like your employer's offering you or whatever the world's offering you. You get to decide. And what a gift that we live in a time where there are so many opportunities to order our lives the way that we see fit. And I'm sorry for this very long-winded answer. It's something I'm
That was so
very
good.
passionate about. But it is possible today, and I'm so thankful to live in a time where I've had so much opportunity.
Yeah, and I want to echo that, because don't be afraid to ask your employer. And you know, just as we've been talking here, especially if you're a valuable employee and you know if you're a valuable employee and you know if you've been doing a good job, don't be afraid to ask. We've got two mothers here in the office right now that work in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and work remote Mondays and Fridays so that they can be there for their children. And years ago, because I'm by far the oldest person on this panel, I have a 33-year-old who just got married 3 weeks ago. So I'm waiting on the grandma moment. But years ago, when I was working for the U.S. Senate and I was pregnant with my son, I knew I did not want to work full time, and nobody in our office worked part time. But I asked, and I was told yes. And so I worked part time until he went to college. So I finished my time with the Senate, and then when I came to JMI and met with Dr. McClure, I said, I want to be there with my son when he comes home from school every day, and I want to go to his baseball games, and I want to do that until he goes to college. And every year, Dr. McClure would go, "You ready to come back yet?" I'm like, "Nope, he hadn't graduated from high school yet." And then took him to college and came back to town and started working full time. So don't be afraid to ask.
That's a great point. I actually have a friend, similar situation, and it goes back to what you were saying about proving yourself. She was a yes person. She was a hard worker. She had been with the organization for almost 10 years at that point. In her role, they did not do part-time. It just was not a thing that they did. She had her son and was like, hey, that's what I would like to do now. That's the only way I can see this working. And they approved it. And she's one of the few people that had this opportunity, but again, because she's proven herself and she asked. So you never know if you don't ask. And I appreciate that. I think because of pandemic and because people we've seen maybe through Zoom and into people's homes, I think culturally the corporate world and a lot of workplaces are just getting more on board and kind of coming back to that, oh yeah, family is important and we are people outside of work. And so more and more employers are becoming amenable to flexible options and all of those things. So thank you all for that encouragement, because that is one of the #1 questions we get from women in our network. We had a couple questions come in real quick on the Q&A. So I thought, yeah, I see Hadley, you might be typing an answer. We could do a couple lightning round, quick responses. Kayla asked, what is the best thing to touch on in your weekly check-in with your direct report? How would y'all recommend organizing those calls? Hadley, did you already send her an answer? Did you want to wait?
I dropped an answer in. I just said,
Okay, perfect.
morale, any problems I can help you solve, or anything I can communicate on your behalf.
Love it. And I would also, we had it in one of our other professional development week suggestions and tips, but bringing an agenda, that's a good way to manage up too and manage down. Like if you're requesting a meeting or if you have a check-in with your direct report or your manager, share an agenda so that that's not something they're having to scramble and figure out. And then they know they can add to it, but then they know what you need to talk about and you can be more efficient. So agendas are good. And then Julia asked, what are your favorite strategies for managing down? What are your go-to methods when learning about a new direct report? I know we talked about communication style and things. So do you all have any tips for figuring out those communication styles or how direct reports work? Kristin, what kind of you guys do, like personality tests or training?
Yeah, so I guess for the first part of the question, just strategies for managing down, I make sure that I'm very clear with my expectations. And I like to work with set numbers just so it's very clear, as well as letting that person choose what their goals will be, which always isn't a reality. But sometimes it helps your staff have buy-in, and it helps them better understand why they're doing it. And as long as through my experience, I can look at something and say like, okay, well, I think that goal is a little bit low or a little bit high, but I'm ultimately guiding them to choosing their own goals. And that's been the most effective. We actually started doing that about 2 years ago, and it's been extremely effective. And then when it comes to the personality test, I'm trying to remember what it's called, because it was New Horizon was the actual company that did the training. But I don't remember what the actual test is called. But I can send it to Alexis. It basically breaks you down, and it's letter based.
Like
but it's
DISC
not
or something.
Oh, that's what it is. It's DISC.
Oh, there you go. Yes, I've used that in other places. The DISC. Yeah, the DISC
Yep.
assessment. Yep, that's a great one. Absolutely. Oh, and I like that, the predictive index. Okay.
I think these tools are good if your employer has them. If you don't have tools like that at your disposal, sometimes I think it's interesting just to ask people, what do you respond to? How do you like to be communicated with? Like what do you think makes you tick? What's important to you? How often do you like to receive feedback? Because people may not be totally self-aware and they may not give perfectly good answers, but they can give you an idea. That's probably a good starting point.
Yeah. And for college students, try to work on that and just like maybe ask close friends or parents, get some honest feedback and try to figure it out. Because sometimes you don't know until you've been in those situations. Yeah, so it's a good way to start that self-awareness journey. And Miss Becky, what about your tips?
A couple things. So our office, we do a staff retreat every year, and we usually do some sort of personality test, but the one that's been most popular is the Enneagram. And we all know each other, and we're like, oh, you are such an 8, or you are, you are acting like a 4 right now. And so as new folks join the team, we make a big deal of them taking the Enneagram, and then at a staff meeting, we all share what we are, and we make it fun. But as far as new reports, at the very beginning, we try to be very social with them. I know that sounds kind of lame, but their first day here, we male or female, like we have a welcome, something on their desk, whether it's flowers or a plant, a note from the staff, we're so glad you're here. The entire staff takes the new person to lunch together, and then their direct supervisor, will meet with them throughout that first day. And then we ask that their first week, they spend time with every member of the staff. Now, we have a smaller staff, so it's not like we're working in an organization with several hundred people. So, and with just a couple of exceptions, everybody's in the same building. So we spend a lot of time at the front end getting to know our new employee and letting the new employee get to know us before we start kind of the traditional job training, if you will. So we kind of operate on the more we know you, the more you know us, the better this is going to work theory. So we kind of invest at the front end and do some kind of fun things to get them integrated with the staff.
And that full circle comes back to one of your first points about knowing the whole person, like knowing them as individuals. Miss Becky, what's your Enneagram?
I am what am I? I think I'm a 2.
A 2. I was going to say, I bet you're a 2.
Yeah.
I saw Hadley or 6 or an 8. I'm a 6. So yes, we've done that on our team too. It's pretty fun. Well, we are out of time, and I want to be respectful of time. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. And thank you all for tuning in to this fourth session of our 2024 Professional Development Week. Tomorrow is Friday. We have one more, our final session. So you want to get a job in DC with Kyle Bunnell of the Heritage Foundation Job Bank. It's going to be a great conversation for anyone who's interested in that DMV career path. So please tune in, check out our website for more information. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.